you. Welcome everyone. Today is a mouthful. We're going to jump from traditional AEC processes, uh, but consuming manufacturing products. So a lot of terminology to explore and educate on today, as well as what the tools are and how they work, and from a fundamentals viewpoint. So let's get started here. Our goal with any of this process is to simplify. Some of that has happened, of course, in the past, and we've done the best we can. Manufacturers have posted Revit families for folks to put into their models, but oftentimes architects will modify those families to fit their need, and/or the variation that they put in the model isn't something that's actually buildable. So it ends up being some sort of customization, and/or something that can't even be built. So the goal here is for the manufacturers to provide something that's configurable that architects can then use. So no custom products. What does that mean? For the manufacturers, in this process, we can add specs, rules, and constraints to the inventor models and then publish that so that the architects can then customize accordingly and place as needed in their Revit family, as Revit families in their model. That's the super high level view of all of this. What does that look like from a bigger picture pull back out? So the product engineer, they've already got their parts modeled in Inventor. They simply publish with some settings, of course, up to the Informed Design portal for a given project. Designers, engineers, architects consume those parts uh, in the model, whether they be doors, walls, windows, switches, whatever the widget is they're trying to put in the model, right? And they push that into their Revit project, which then gets published to docs. And then the end of this is the product engineer can then consume that Revit model to then do a bill of materials takeoff to understand where and why some of their parts have been used, maybe model A versus model B. And of course, over the course of the development of that Revit project, from concept to construction documents, is not one day. It's several days, right? Could be 6 months in that time window. And those products could change over those 6 months or even longer, depending on the type of project. So the product engineer can then create a revision and update those published parts back to the Informed Design. And we can essentially do change management through this process as well. So again, high level there. What does that look like? So in Inventor, you've already got your assembly. We simply add a product definition, defining the content, defining the rules. And Jim's going to take you through that in some detail once we show you how I would consume it. As Jim would like to say, I'm the sizzle and he's all the meat. So we'll do the sizzle first just to get everybody's attention. So what do I do? In Revit, I simply discover those parts that have been shared, and maybe I need to customize them, maybe I don't. Customize means like use a door size or a window, left-handed versus right-handed, that sort of thing. Insert those into the model, and then of course, ultimately share that project back to all the different product people that are in the project. So what does that mean? So when we're an inventor and in Revit, there's some tools to facilitate this process. We can create what are called code blocks for Inventor. We can publish static products. Maybe there's just one, it just is what it is. The process exports an RFA, which is a Revit family for Revit folks to consume. For those unfamiliar, Revit families very much like an AutoCAD block. It's just what it's called inside of Revit. And you've got a couple of ways to share that. We'll explain what bridge and all that stuff means as we get further down the table here. Same sort of thing in Revit. I will browse the content that gets published, and then I can insert it and update and or replace depending on the scenario. Now, the tool set started in 24. So initially the first full version was in 25, but as you saw in the Inventor slide, there's some updates that came along with 26 to add additional functionality. Again, this is an evolving process as we add details to the workflow. So in 26, I can now update, maybe there's a version 2, right? I mentioned that earlier, to that particular product. I can now just simply replace with the newer version. Or maybe I want a different product altogether. That manufacturer says, hey, we heard you talking and we created a whole new product and we've pushed it into the project for you to use, right? So now we just want to swap. So lots of good tools there that if we're working in 26 versus 25. All right, so enough gabbing about this here. We're going to basically do this in 2 steps. I'm going to jump to the end of the process, right? I'm going to consume the content, and then once we show that sort of process of like consumption, updating, revising, what might happen over the course of the product evolution, we'll jump backwards in time to let Jim show you how those products even get to exist in the project. Okay, so cue the nervous music. We're going to do this live, right? Okay, so let me jump over to Revit, and I'm going to open my project here. So nothing fancy here. The project lives in Autodesk Docs. So I'm going to go ahead and open my project. And if I take a look, I've already got sort of a sample wall here. We were playing around to kind of show some variations on a theme. And if I zoom out, this is just a 3D perspective view of a particular space. And without getting too ridiculous, I just threw a sample wall in there for just a placeholder for this example. Okay. So how does the process work? I go to my Informed Design tab in the ribbon in Revit, and I just start with inserting a product. We get this pop-up window, and I've got 2 choices. I can either consume some sample content to understand the process for those just getting started. And what's in this sample content? Sort of a different piece of different things. So I've got a staircase. We'll take a look at that here in a second. There's a door, balustrade, window, lots of different pieces, right? Just to give you a sort of an idea of how all of this works. But I'm going to use something that Jim has created for me. So let me go to my project. And in my projects, this is where he would publish this into Autodesk Docs. And if I go to his specific vendor folder, I can consume his products. So you do this one at a time, by the way. This particular window has a couple of different releases here. There's some details, right, that he can publish in that process. So that's the one I'm going to use, release 1, just to kind of show the process of updating releases. So I click open, and I've got 2 tabs here, configure and select. Configure allows me to generate a specific configuration based on, again, this is all coming from what Jim has published. I'm not making any of these numbers up, right? I'm going to put numbers in there that he allows me to put in. And in some cases, you can actually generate pre-configured models, if you will, as part of this process. So I pick my choices, whatever they are. Pick this model state that I might like. Currently, it's set to primary. In Inventor terminology, that simply means the full detail. But as Jim will show you, we can generate many other model states, of course. But there's a BIM model state as an example, which simplifies the model for putting it inside of a Revit project. So that's what I'm going to use. I've got my choices. I click generate. Hey, just to let you know, this is going to take a minute. So that's going to generate this, what they're called variants. And in a moment here, I'll be able to choose it on this select tab. Okay, so it's generated. Go to my select tab. And now it's populating a list because we've done this a few times, of course, preparation for this webinar. There you can see an earlier version, right, that I did. So I can insert that one. You can see the timestamps on all these. So I go, once I pick the variant I want, I can look at the table, right, kind of scroll through. I can look at the details of that variant. But ultimately what I want to do is insert to my project. Now the important part is make sure there's no command running, right? It can't interrupt what you're already might happen to be doing. So let me go ahead and click insert. And that's akin to loading a family. So you can see I'm already in this place window tool. So I simply place it. And there it is. I forgot something. Let me actually give it the right sill height here. And that can be set in the defaults. We were just kind of playing around with different examples. So there's my window. It's not cutting the geometry automatically. That'll be on the roadmap, and we'll discuss that later. So all I've got to do is the standard modify and cut geometry process. And of course, now that I'm doing this live, it's not doing it. But you can see where I've done it with the doors. You'd pick the wall and then pick the door, and then it cuts the geometry. So that's the consumption process. Ultimately, as with any Revit project that we do in the cloud, what's the one thing we do? We synchronize with Central, right? Which means in this case up to Autodesk Docs. And this is going to take a minute. And so at some point we'll come back and do the last step. But what happens, let me just kind of switch here to Docs. So you can see it's going to iterate here in a second. But there's also this Informed Design website into the project. So we're still looking at the same structure. But here I am again, this is the last step. I've placed all those things in the model. As the manufacturer, I can select on that model. That's a different one, but that's okay. I click open. This is a different sample. And if it found products in that model, they'd be listed here. So let me go back. There we go. So let me open this one instead. There we go. So I've got a couple of different products in here. So I've got a door set. They're all on release 2. And here I've got a window. I've got some windows, some on release 1, some on release 2. Uh-oh. So let me just look at the doors first. So I've got 2 doors in the model. Right, I only put those two on that wall that you saw. And then what the manufacturer would do is generate content. So drawings and or PDFs, as well as bills of materials based on either model state. Typically, you'd want it to be on the primary model state. And we can do this at the instance level and at the aggregate level. We just didn't have it set up for this example. So I make my choices. Send to allows me to put it either back into the Autodesk project or my Fusion team site. Again, this is from the manufacturer's perspective. But I'm just going to throw it into the vendors, into the Autodesk project. So I'll drop it there. So I've defined what I'm outputting. I'm telling it where to put it. It gives me a little summary, and then I just hit submit request. And all this is happening in the background. Ultimately in the cloud, right? None of this process is really happening in my desktop application. The only thing that's happening is when I go to insert the family into my project. And then, of course, now I'm working locally in Revit at that point. But everything that I've shown it's all happening up in the cloud. So we'll go through and review those once those actually publish. So that's where this trail would end. So let me back up a step. I've consumed the variants, right? That's sort of the first step. And then I've generated essentially a bill of materials for what was consumed in the model. Okay, what happens if we need to generate a new variant? So let me just get rid of this window for a moment. And I don't want to delete that door. I want to replace it with a new variant. So I go back to my Informed Design tab and I hit Replace. Sounds complicated, right? So let me pick the door that I want to replace. And I'm essentially back to that original window. But notice it says Replace up here. So, okay, it knew which product to start with, right? Oh, maybe I need this to be right-handed instead of left-handed. Okay, sure. Maybe I need to be clear instead of painted, whatever, right? So I'll just go ahead with changing the handing. I hit generate. And again, just like before, this is going to take a moment. Okay, select tab for status. So this should show a right-handed version. There we go. Now it still says generating, even though it's listed here, essentially creating a visualization file. Most of the stuff is already ready to go. But once this replace button populates, we'll be able to actually replace it. This is where I wish I could fast forward, but I'm at the mercy of the cloud, as it were. Okay.
And fortunately, it only seems to take forever when there's an audience.
Yes. There we go.
There we go. I was just waiting for me to say something stupid, and I was ready.
Yep. So notice that in the preview here, the hand switched. So it should be right-handed instead of left-handed. And if I go and look, it's now switched. Now, when you do the replace, it's one at a time. Some thought would be, what if I just, picked one and select all similar in the view kind of thing, and replace them all? It doesn't work that way currently. You have to pick one, replace the one, and then select all the others, sort of a match properties process that we do in Revit to then match the one that's here. That's all that's happening. Okay, so I've done the replace with a new variant. Okay, what's another scenario that I might want to do? Um, what if? So here's a different door altogether, right? Compared to this guy. What if I wanted to replace using an existing variant? So again, going back to this same dialogue, let me just start with this guy. Instead of having to create a new one, I would just go to select. Same process, right? I would just start here and go, oh, yeah, we generated, this was the one I really wanted, right? I could pick it and hit replace, but in the sake of interest of time, don't necessarily need to show that at the moment. What about updates from the manufacturer? What if, so in the case I placed a version 1, right? In one instance, if I go to my update content button, this is a situation where the manufacturer's updated stuff. And oops, I need to see this. These versions are all still marked as active, even though they might be older versions. So I could choose to replace them or not. So these Revit IDs, right, they're just showing what it is. These are all windows. And then I can choose replace with, oh, that's version 1 or version 2 or whatever the case may be. So there's a way for the manufacturer to then give us updated information. So that's what this secondary update process is. I guess the applicable situation there is if a particular product becomes obsolete because there's a newer version. Maybe the manufacturer doesn't create that part anymore, or they use different materials now, right? So that original version isn't manufacturable for whatever reason, right? So there's a bunch of different reasons for change, which is why we're here. And that's the essential workflow, right? Just from the architect's viewpoint. Jim, you want to go ahead and jump in and show the process from inventor's viewpoint? Okay, go ahead, Jim. I can see your screen, but I
I was
can't hear
talking
you.
wonderfully there, but I still had the microphone muted. Life is good. Okay, so what Kevin showed there was ideal. I've got a customer now using my product. Excellent. Okay, how did we get there? Let's take a look at that from the front end of things. Here's that same inventor model. It's got some three-dimensional annotations. Well, model space. No, sorry, using AutoCAD terms. Some annotations that were showing up on the thumbnail, giving a bit of a clue what was going on. This is the current sizing. This is text linked to some parameters. This model was made taking advantage of parameters, where here in the user parameter area, these have been set up knowing that this is the type of thing I want the customer to be able to specify. Specifically, ones are marked as key. That's just going to help me out farther down the line. Also, I'll mention it now, any files, components making up this window assembly, it's a good idea to use the same naming for the parameters there. So I've got the parameters driving things. I've got a model state, as Kevin mentioned earlier, both primary, which is the one I need to build to, but also a simplified version, reducing the face count, making life easier for my customers. And I can have more than one here, but just stay with it for now. Built with basic inventor techniques. I will say, though, that this needs to be a self-contained assembly, meaning it's going to have its own project file that's going to look at the folder where this is. Anything this assembly needs to be directly either in that same folder or down in the subfolder underneath. Think of it as just being the tip of the iceberg, and everything needs to be in the same iceberg. You can't be referencing other icebergs for parts. Now, this also has iLogic applied to it. Some of it is things along the lines of, maybe changing from one model state to another and pushing those model states down to any subassemblies or parts. Maybe just pushing the parameter values. If I make a change here, have it pushed down to the subcomponents, so on. Any of the design variations, I'm going to drive it this way. Now, if I have, as Kevin mentioned before, just a standalone piece that I'm putting out to my customers through the Informed Design, I don't need iLogic. It's a standalone part file in that case. Fantastic. But for an assembly, this is a great way of getting everybody to be on the same, on the same level at the same time. The other thing is this has some definitions added at the BIM level. Now, the window's very boring. I don't have any connections, any conduits, ducts, so on going on. Now, that kind of makes it nice from a demo point of view. Excuse me a second. So that was taken care of, but also there was a separate solid that was marked to be the void. And this is what Kevin used when he was cutting away from the wall. Again, roadmap in the future to have it so where you don't have to do that manual step. Well, we're not in the future yet. Now, once I've got this working and flex it, make sure it works before you try and publish it. You really don't want to tick off your customers. I go to the Informed Design tab, and I've got all of one button. And this brings up the product definitions. And here you can see out of this file, I've produced two different things. One to one folder, another one to another folder. And I can say, hey, I want to show folks how this was done. So I'll highlight that one and edit it. And I'll take a moment while it populates everything like the thumbnail here. There we go. And I can say, what's the name of this? I can edit that. Is this can be configurable by my customer? Yes or no? What's the file that's going out? Where's that root folder? And like I said, everything needs to be below that root folder. And what Inventor project file am I using? And here, there's already a drawing template assigned to this. Basically, a drawing's already been made from this, and then as variations are made, I can get a drawing of each variation if I need to. The parameters, right now I've got this filter to show just user parameters, but here's the ones that already came over as key, and they were already adopted. What's not shown here, I didn't mention it before, it comes up in the slide a little bit later, but you can also help yourself if these parameters in the Inventor world are multi-value, such as what the frame finish is, clear versus painted, what the materials, hardwood versus softwood. That's going to help me on the next step when I go to the actual coding. In the coding area, I've got a couple of different, I'll call them environments. One where I'm setting up the way my form is going to look. And then the second one's where the magic actually happens. And this is using a style of programming, I believe it's Google's Blocky. I think I said that correct. Style of drag and drop, kind of like the way you can drag and drop snippets of code in Inventor, but this just takes it up a level. A lot easier to visualize. And I got various tools like logic and looping, and math, and so on. So while it's not really shown on this one, I could set things like a list of common values, such as what is the types of hinging, what's the type of finish, what's the type of material. And those came from those multi-value lists. Again, I didn't have to do any work there. I can also set limits to things like the opening size. Nope. Sorry, you need a 60-meter long window. You're not going to get it this way. set this up, I do my testing. I'm not going to change anything here because, as you saw with Kevin, when I do a change, it needs to go out to the cloud, work through the Inventor model on the cloud, and then show it to me. And no, not during a live demo. But I can go and push values to the model just to see what would happen on the screen. And yes, it would take a few minutes. Steal the values that are currently being shown and refresh my fields here. Then once I have things working the way I want, I would go and set what my customer is going to see. So in this case, what family and category that it's going to go to, that's set back over in the BIM content. And maybe I really don't want the end user to see that, so I could shut that off, let them only have that simplified model statement. It's just named BIM. There's nothing special about that. I could have called it simplified or something along those lines. Do I want to be able to bring back a solid model, an Inventor assembly? I could turn that on or not. Maybe not on the Windows, but maybe on something that's a lot more complex. Might be useful. The drawing world. Do I want to be able to have it publish DWGs to that to the cloud folder, or just PDFs? And probably the thing I'm most interested in is getting back an accurate bill of material. So send me the bill for the full primary. And finally, I could get a neutral format, so not having my Inventor work geometry exposed. No, it's just the naked geometry. Here's the shape, here's the size, not why is it that way at all. So that's the type of information that I can request. As I'm developing things, I can go and save, or as I make a change, I could go ahead and hit publish. That's what puts it up onto the area. And Inventor model values don't equal the definition. Thank you for the error check in front of a live audience. So let's go and set everything back to default and push that. Thank you. Fingers crossed. Whoops. Publish checks, how to resolve, syncing and spacing. I missed one step on the sync. If it doesn't work this time, I'm going to do the classic cooking show. Let's see, let's update the form too. And once more push. Thank you. I always compliment the software when it does. Oh, I'm missing some step somewhere. Then it's going to be saved. It's this. I've got something that I changed away from the default, and I'm trying to publish it, and it's not giving me information. Unfortunately, I don't have a screen capture of that next step handy. Nope. But what you would see is I would specify what project am I publishing to, what folder, what folder I want to go to. In fact, let me just go back here and waiting for the button to come up to take me out to the web. Oh, silly me! I've got it sitting down below here. There we go. So what I'd be doing on that publish is specifying what's the name of the project I'm going to, and then where am I putting it in there. So Kevin set up a vendors folder, and then hierarchy from that point of view. As he's publishing things, then I start getting information in here. That's about it on the Inventor end of things. So let me turn it back over to you, Kevin, for the slideshow in the last little bit, and go from there.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, okay, we've got a process that we consume data that's real. The manufacturer provides that real data. And then, of course, once we've put it in the model, there's a way to publish, for the manufacturer to publish, essentially a bill of materials and content, and then go manufacture what's needed for that project. How do we get started on all this? So the licenses that you need, uh, licenses you already have likely for Revit and or Inventor, depending on who you are in this process. The only thing that's additional is access to Autodesk Docs. In general, Revit folks that are doing cloud work sharing are going to have access to Autodesk Docs by default to just do that process. Probably the license that will be new is for the Inventor folks to get this Autodesk Docs license. I'm not a salesperson, but it's in the scope of what an Inventor costs. A Docs license is relatively inexpensive, especially if we're selling content to the architect is going to buy some products from you, right? So should easily cover that. Where are the links? So there's the links. So autodesk.com/products/informed design, Inventor, or Revit. And just a quick look at where those are, what they look like. So on the Inventor page, there's a download now button. So this is an add-in to an Inventor. So it gives you all the different tabs and tools in the ribbon that Jim just showed. And the same thing for the Revit folks, a download now button. What is important to know, it's the oldest version you can start with is 24 and more recent. Some of the updates that I showed that happened in 26 don't push backwards. So, and the same for Jim and Inventor. If you want some of those latest and greatest tools, you have to be on the latest and greatest version of the different tool sets. In the architectural world, I know many architects that run 5 flavors of Revit. So in most cases, depending on the project, they will certainly have 26 and or 24, depending on which project they're working on. So that's where we start. Um, how does the manufacturer get access to that project? How does the architect get content from the manufacturer? So steps 3 and 4 are essentially the same thing as communication. Hey, I'm Joe Architect. I'd like to use your widget in my project. Instead of this sort of bland generic thing that I've got here, I'd like to invite you to my project. So gets the manufacturer's email, right, from the manufacturer, and that's how the communication would typically start. Just real quick, what does that mean? So here I am as the project administrator for the project. All I've got to do is add a member to the project. So that's how I would invite. And then as the project administrator, I would then have to then give Jim access to the location to then create that content for me. That's really how we get started. So nothing super fancy there. Project admins for BIM projects in the cloud do this all day, every day, whether it's the structural engineer or in this case now the manufacturer getting involved in the process. The new part will be, of course, for the manufacturers now adding their content to this platform. Okay, so that's sort of how we get started. Jim's got some Inventor tips. You want to talk through these for me, Jim?
Sure. Go ahead. So first of all, the KISS principle. Keep it simple. What you see there is not what the architect wants, what Revit wants. If I had 50 of those in a hall or something like that, it would really start messing with performance. So that's where I make the model states. get rid of as many extra faces as I can, but still get the point across of here's what this product is. Okay, next one. I mentioned this before. Make sure everything is self-contained. So you start at that root folder is everything that you need to have that assembly behave properly in that root folder or subfolders underneath that root folder. So the root folder, I think of it as the tip of the iceberg. But again, not going outside to content center folders. Have them be local. Any other type of common folders you might have set up for your normal Inventor project file, no, you need to bring them down local, and you will make a local project file just for that one family. Okay, next. Mention this one as well. Use parameters. The user parameters in the base model, in that top level model, those are going to be the ones that are keyed into starting to develop your form. And keep those names consistent. If I call it rough opening height, I want to call it rough opening height and everything else that's in that assembly that uses it. You can see how the list there for, in this case, the one on the screen is the hinges. There's fixed window, there's a left hung, a right hung, top hung. That was a multi-value parameter at the inventor level, and it filled in on the list for me automatically. And then the ones I flag as key parameters also get picked up automatically there when I'm building the form. And click again, please. iLogic itself, that's what's going to be used to push the parameter values. So I change the size of the opening or the desired window, so on. Well, that's got to go down to all the framework and all that. So yeah, push it down via the iLogic pushing parameter values. At this point, iLogic is the sole supported, I hate to call it an add-in because it's not anymore, but yeah, it's the sole supported add-in. And then finally, there's one more click on there. Make sure that you've checked the file before you publish it. Right. Make sure to flex it through some changes in values at the inventor level. That way you can be confident your inventor assembly is going to work before you start worrying about adding the information that the customer is going to see. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Jim. So as we've both mentioned throughout this process, this all started in 24 or versions 24 through 26. And there is a roadmap for additional functionality. So you can see the link there. Probably easier just to Google Informed Design roadmap, honestly. And let me just kind of take you there so you can see sort of what we're talking about. And the idea is this is simply an update as things go along. So for instance, improved publishing in Inventor, include release notes for each release. So that way, me as the architect, structural engineer, MEP, whoever the product is for, can understand what the iterations are. Maybe I don't need the new iteration. Maybe the old iteration is fine. Code blocks. New specialized blocks are coming, but that is later. So sort of after stuff we're already working on. So there's a long list here. No reason to go through each one of these, but you can see in some cases they're done. In some cases, it's something they're going to do later or currently working on. So long list here. So here's what's next. Create outputs on the web. So lots of stuff, lots of good things coming along. What we're showing today is simply a great way to get started in this conversation, to get the manufacturing content into the model sooner, faster, quicker, so that architects are actually specifying something that's buildable. instead of finding out when we actually go to generate bids. And the contractors are like, wait, that's not even a real thing. What are we doing? All right. So here we are. We've walked you through A to B and C on the different processes. Do we have questions in the pane?
No, none in the pane at the moment.
Okay. I guess I'd like to sort of, while we're talking about questions here for 2 seconds, I did have a person ask me offline before all this, before we started the webinar, why use Informed Design? Why not just post my Revit families to the cloud and let architects have at it and call it a day? Well, when I said that earlier, one of the issues with that is, of course, once I have that family in my project, I can edit that family just like I can edit any family in the Revit model. And if I need to modify it to fit my needs, I certainly can. Secondly, who knows what version that family started from? Is that even it could even be an obsolete version of that family at this point, again, given the age of how long it took to get to construction. So lots of reasons, especially when it comes to document management, why sort of that publishing to either your own manufacturer website or to BIM Object or any other third-party family site for Revit, you can kind of lose control of what's being consumed by the architects in their projects. So when we put this stuff into Autodesk Docs, we instantly generate version control. What's released, what's obsolete, what's an improved version. So the information becomes much more clarified in that sort of environment. You saw in that list, okay, that family was built in for Revit 24, and I need it built for 26, or vice versa. I'm in 24 and I need it built for 24. So you can do all that from this platform. Historically, what architects would do is give me the lowest common denominator, and I'll just use that 2019 version across all my projects. And of course, every time it's got to get upgraded to whatever version you're actually in for it to get used. So there's lots of different improvements in efficiency and what's current, what's accurate, and what's appropriate for the particular model that I'm in.
So
The
there
other thing,
is,
go ahead. I
okay,
was going to say,
there is a question posted. You had a nice segue there as far as, is a doc license needed for every user?
oh, great question. So the way Docs is licensed, let me just jump back there for a moment. A Docs license is assigned to a named user, just like your license is assigned for Inventor. Depending on the size of licenses you have, you can do a couple of different scenarios. Some people do a token scenario where if you're not in Docs every day, like an architect might be, you can buy a bucket of tokens, and then as people use it, right, it pulls a token out of the bucket, and that gives you access to Docs for the day. So there's a couple of different ways to consume that licensing. And if we do this live, oops, I'll just show you, right? So Autodesk Docs, you can certainly start with a free trial. It's fully functional for the first 30 days. And you can see the price here depending on your involvement. Again, this is directly from Autodesk. Certainly, you can certainly purchase these things from us as well, depending on the term and scenario. But the base scenario is a named user license. That is true. Okay, great question. So that would be the only additional license, right? Yeah, just the Docs. Yep. The Informed Design is just a free download, gets installed, and you use all those tools that we showed today for free in your desktop apps as you have them.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay. All right. Well, might as well go ahead and wrap up today.